ahead and all right, can everyone see my screen? I think I can see Alexis. Alexis, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Okay, great. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Sarah Gady, and I am one of the career consultants in the Career Center. And today I'm just going to briefly overview and intro resumes. I know we're just really scratching the surface, but I also want to be mindful of time as well. So these are things we can always do a deeper dive in the breakout room or even on a personal appointment as well. And so when it comes to resumes, things to consider, it's not a definition of everything you've ever done. It's more of a marketing tool that's aligned with those positions, or even graduate programs sometimes want a resume as well. It's aligned with that target that you're applying to. So this encompasses your aligned skills, aligned education and experiences, not everything you've ever done or every skill you have. You have a lot of great skills, but it's more of a filtering process of what skills really stand out to that position, that internship, that full-time job, that graduate program. So, and from an employer standpoint, it's what can this individual really do for my department, or how can they increase productivity? For graduate school, it can be how does this individual showcase that they're passionate in the field and have the relevant skills, as well as the balance of skills in graduate school. So those are some things you'll want to target in those types of documents. So if you think of a stepping stone for the resume, it's like the resume leads you to the interview and the interview leads you to the job. Some grad schools even do interviews as well as part of the process. But that's really a great starting point to think of the resume. It's that introduction, hitting on those key points. And resumes are highly individualized because you all, even though may have the major of psychology, have different interests, have different career passions, have different experiences, different backgrounds. And so that's where resumes are also different. So we'll hit on kind of the key concepts to consider. And so this is just a brief resume, or not brief, but one example of a resume template. And again, this isn't the standing example for every resume. This is just to showcase some key concepts. Things we see here are consistency in formatting, intentional about putting your education towards the top, because when you're thinking entry level, that's one of the first needs that those employers or even graduate programs are going to want to see. The more professional experience you have down the line, the more that education makes its way down. Relevant experience. This could be internships. This could be even engagement in student organizations. Again, as long as it gives you enough alignment to go into some detail on bullet points that align to that position, that internship, that graduate program, those would be key indicators. It doesn't have to be paid experience. You see that there's very intentional language on this document. I apologize, it probably is a little small to read, but the formatting is really action-oriented paraphrase statement. So if we think about it, it's not full sentence structure. It's really focused on that action word first, that action word that relates to some of the key skills that the employer is looking for. So if an employer, just for a simple example, is looking for leadership, is looking for teamwork, is looking for critical thinking, what action words reflect that? In the next slide, I have some examples of categories of action verbs that you can choose from, just to showcase some examples. But that's really a good starting point. Inventory the key skills, create statements that reflect accomplishments you made of those skills. So that's an example of how to format some of those statements. And then also quantifying where applicable. So how much, how many people did you work with? Or what age groups, if some of you want to work with children and you have experience working with children, what were the age groups? Or if some of you have an interest in, like I saw an interest in potentially IO, if you increase productivity, or you did some preliminary experiences in doing hiring, or making more informed decisions from a personnel standpoint at some of your jobs. Like those would be things you'd want to reflect in that type of field too. I saw some interest in clinical mental health. So thinking about those great communication skills, problem solving skills, skills where you've had to maybe handle difficult situations and you can create rapport and resolutions to those problems. So those are some things you'd want to think of for skill-wise, and diversifying your categories on your resume. That's one of the examples that you see here too. Instead of just listing activities in a long-running list of everything you've participated in college, be intentional. Employers only look at this about 10 seconds, not to add extra pressure to the matter, but more so perspective to make sure that you're diversifying your resume. And this can even come from projects as long as they're relevant from a field standpoint or a skills standpoint. Because I know some of us may or may not have worked, and pulling from curriculum experience can count as experience as well. So really the goal here is just being organized and intentional, and consistency in your formatting conveys the message of this individual has strong attention to detail, as well as also this document's easy to read in 10 seconds. So that's some things to consider briefly for considering target points onto your resume. This was that action verb list I was talking about. This is just if some of you want to take a picture or screenshot, or I can send this presentation to you as well, whatever works best. But this kind of categorizes some of those, like if you inventory the key skills from the job, if they want innovative skills, helping skills, instead of using the same word over and over again, this adds variety to some of your statements, which is important as well. So one of the key things that I mentioned earlier is like tailoring to the job description. So I have a specific job description to kind of just do a quick example of what I would refer to that. So this is an example of a case manager. And so some of you have interest in human service positions. This could be an example of how, when you're looking at a job description, I know in that previous example, we saw a summary of qualifications. So if you have a preferred section or a minimum qualification section on the job description that you're reviewing, those could be good indicators of content in that summary of qualifications, because if they read that section first, that's going to really reel them in on their curiosity for some of those topics there. So if this position wants experience and training in crisis intervention, or working in child welfare. So if any of you have those experiences, and it can be even from volunteering or even just passion in working with that population, those could be things and experiences to be incorporated onto that resume. And then when it comes to essential functions or job duties is a great place to get an idea of what types of bullet points you can use as a guide for your experience bullet points. So for example, maybe someone didn't exactly accept crisis calls and provide supports to families in crisis. Maybe someone didn't directly do that same role in a job they had, but maybe they had to handle a lot of different incoming calls or do a lot of troubleshooting when it came to communication. That would be a guide of what would be important, knowing that's relevant to this role to have in a bullet point of experience. So this is just an example of, again, don't have to align with every little bullet point on a job description, but just so you can get an idea of alignment and formatting concepts. Those are some great places and starting points to do so. VMOC is a resume reviewing software that currently enrolled students have access to. So again, it's on the Career Center website. You go to resources, you're going to see VMOC there, and you upload your resume. You have up to 10 resumes that you can upload, and it works off of artificial intelligence, so AI, and it'll provide automated feedback regarding your resume of other job template or of other resume templates that have been in the system. So it cross-references the formatting, spelling, key marketable skills. Are those aligned in your resume? So it's a great starting point to get the foundational concepts of resume formatting down, and it's immediate feedback. So if you're up at midnight and you need your resume reviewed, you do have that option of using the software for your resume. So that's a software that's available to you. Once you graduate, you do have only up to 3 months of using the software. So just wanted to put that out there. And so to schedule an appointment with the Career Center, this is an example of how you do that. You go into Handshake, you go to the Career Center, and it'll prompt you to select appointments and an appointment type and time that works with your schedule. Right now, it's a very busy time in the semester, so I highly suggest if you're thinking about scheduling an appointment in the Career Center, go ahead and schedule that appointment in advance, just so you have that in the books. So you might be wondering, what are then some appointment types? This is a slide that showcases all our services. We help with graduate school planning, resumes and cover letter development, interviewing skills, networking, career planning and exploration is also something. We have a whole employer engagement team where we have an events where you can connect with employers and you can see handshake. So those are just some of the many services that we provide in career development. We also have the option of in-person or virtual drop-ins. That's from Tuesday and Wednesday from 2 to 4, and it's designed to be a 15 to 20-minute window, so more quick questions, quick conversations, and then virtuals from 4 to 6 p.m. every Tuesday and Wednesday. But yeah, that's a quick run through of resumes. And I couldn't remember, do we do questions after each presentation or do we wait till the breakout sessions?
We'll go ahead and wait until the breakout session.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for presenting though.
Yes, thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Next, if you don't mind, Sally, if you could do your presentation next.
Yes, let me share my screen real quick. Okay, so it's gonna be hard to follow such a great presentation, Sarah. It was awesome. I did not know we have that many resources and I'm gonna use them. All right, so today I'm going to be presenting how to build an effective CV. And my name is Queen Doe. I'm going to talk about it in a little bit. Okay, so before I start the presentation, I'm going to introduce myself a little bit. So my name is Queen Doe. It's pronounced like king and queen. You can also call me Sally if that's easier. I am originally from Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. So sometimes my accent will come out a little bit. If you don't understand me, let me know. Will not break my heart. So right now I am pursuing my PhD in psychology. And I am working as the project director at the Pride Family Study Lab under Dr. Shelby Scott. My research interests are in trauma and interpersonal violence, especially in marginalized communities. And in my free time, if I have any, I like to sing, I like to eat a lot of food, I like looking at memes, and I like hanging out with my dog, Grizzly. Okay. So here's my agenda for today. So first, I'm going to be talking about what is a CV, the definitions and its purpose. And then I will be talking about how to build a CV. And then at the end, I'm going to show you guys some examples. And I want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you have any question, feel free to jump in. Okay, so what is a CV? What do you guys think? Okay, let me look at the chat.
Is it a long resume or a more detailed resume, I should say?
Yeah, that's part of it. That's correct.
Is it like a personal statement?
It includes a personal statement. Yep. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? More education oriented. Yep. Mm-hmm. That is correct. What do you think is used for? So Sari said that I've applied just be a resume. It is similar to a resume. I'm going to be talking about how different it could be.
Is it used for grad school?
It can be used for grad school. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Celia said that it's used for applying for a PhD program. It can be. Yep. Mm-hmm. Anything else? All right. Okay, so yeah, so all of your answers are correct, and I'm gonna break it down in the next line. So CV stands for curriculum vitae and is Latin for course of life. It's a professional document that highlights your educational experiences, your accomplishments, and anything relevant to your field. So I'm going to break it down a little bit how a CV is different from a resume. So a CV is usually referred to as an academic diary, while a resume is a summary of your work experience and background. Although I saw that Sarah called it a one-page marketing tool, so I'm going to use that. Okay, so a CV is used for a job or an admission in academia. So what you were saying before, to apply into a PhD program, to grad school, that's correct. And it's usually used in academia, education, science, and research, while a resume is used for job hunting in a lot of industries. Okay, so a CV is longer. I think some of you said that. So it's usually longer than 3 pages, although I have seen CVs that are longer than 10 pages. And the resume is a 1 page. It's typically 1 to 2 pages. And a CV is usually more comprehensive, so it includes a lot of sections. It has all of your experiences, your publications, your presentations, affiliations, and all that. And then while resume, as Sarah said before, is more tailored to the specific job that you're applying to. Okay, I see that I have 2 questions in the chats. Yep, yeah. So as Dr. Lawson saying, when I was in undergraduate school, my CV was like 1 page, and I was like really sad. But as you advance in your field, you can add more stuff to it. So now mine is like 9 pages. So I'm pretty happy. Okay. All right. So the next section is how to build a CV. What goes into a CV? So here are the sections that you typically include in your CV, and I color code them so that, you know, to according to their difficulty. So for example, the green ones are easy peasy, meaning that right now, any one of y'all can do this. So that includes your contact information, your education, such as UTSA, the relevant courses that you have taken, and the summary or objective or the personal statement that you might have. So yeah, so all of this you should be able to do right now. And if you don't know your contact information, talk to me. Okay, and then the second section would be, okay, not too bad. So these are the sections where it really depends on the things that you have done. So for example, your experiences, your research experiences, if you have any, your teaching experiences, your work experiences. So and your honors, awards, community services, professional affiliations, and all of this. So this section really depends on what you already have done. So that's why I said it's okay, it's not too bad. And some of you might not be able to fill out all of this, and that's okay. And then for the next section that I highlighted in pink, I call them goals, because when I was an undergrad, I did not have any of these. So they're not hard. Like you just need to, you take time to get to these. So they include presentations, not for your classes, but for like conferences, your workshops, and the invited talks. So for example, I am including this one that I'm doing right now on my CV. And any publications, so any published articles that you've written or you authored on, any scholarships that you have, any grants that you got, and your licenses and certifications. Okay. Any questions? Let me check the chat. Yeah, Okay, so yeah, so to Tavia's question, presentations refer to the ones that you have presented or if you have author on. So like if you were to go to a conference and you present a poster there, you can include it on your CV. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes, I do have a lot of examples of what a CV looks like. I'll present that in a little bit. Okay, so let me go next. Okay, so this is pretty much just kind of like a breakdown of the sections in your CV. So again, the first one is your contact information, your summary or a personal statement right here, any professional experiences, any educational experiences, skills, awards, and published works. Okay. All right, so here are some tips on how to build your CV. So the first one is formatting. So remember that you are presenting your CV to someone, an employer or a committee in grad school. So remember that you want to format it in a way that is legible, that it looks nice, organized, and eligible. So you want to choose a good and clear font and keep your layout consistent throughout. And second one is relevance. So you should include only the most relevant and impressive information on your CV. So things like, let's see, like babysitting your sister. It could be included, but it's not the most impressive. So if you don't have to include it, don't. So organization, as I said, you want to organize it in a clear way. You will use section headings, bullet points, spaces to make it clear and concise. And then number 4, you need to proofread your CV before you send it out. So remember to check your spelling, grammar, syntax, because it can be distracting and it can be kind of like a red flag if they find, you know, a lot of grammatical errors and spelling. It doesn't make it look good. Okay, and here are some suggestions from my own experiences. So first of all, keep track of all of your academic and your extracurricular experiences, your honors, any awards, any skills that you acquired. Just keep them in, just keep track of them and document them. You might do that directly on the CV or do it on a different document, but always keep track of them. Because I know that sometimes I would look back and I'm like, oh my God, I did that really incredible thing 10 years ago and I did not have that on my CV. So yeah, always keep track of your stuff. And always update your CV. Your CV is not a fixed document, so you can always add stuff to it. Okay, and this is similar to a resume. You always want to place your most relevant and impressive sections on top, so people will see it right away. And then the third one, be honest. So don't lie on your resume or your CV, but exclude confidence. Okay, I'm gonna check the chat. Okay, awesome. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna show you guys some examples of a CV. So first one, I'm gonna show you different templates. Let me see if I need to share a different screen. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so yeah, so I just want to give you guys a bird view of different templates that people use. So you know that the sections might be the same, like the layout might be the same, but people go with their creativity. So do you? So yeah, so here are some of the templates that people use. And the cool thing about this website is that if you click on some, you can use a template and then develop from there. Okay. And then the next one will be I included a Google Doc that has a template of your CV right here. So if you guys want, you guys can definitely use this, but remember to make a copy and then edit on that copy so your friends can use it too. So yeah, so pretty much the same as I said, your contact information up here, your summary or personal statement here, education, and all that sections that follow. And then last one is my own CV. I'm going to show you a real life experience or a real life example of that. So all these links are on my presentation, and I think it's going to be sent out to you guys later. Okay. So yeah, so this is my CV, and feel free to credit it or to criticize it so I can update. So yeah, the first section is my name and my contact information, my school, where you can find me, my website, my email address. Here's my personal statement. So I think for right now, let's say if you don't have a lot on your CV yet, you can just say who you are, introduce yourself, saying that you're a student at UTSA, what your major is, what you're looking for in a job or in grad school, and what you're interested in. Okay, and then the next section is education. So you just list out your education, your degree, the field of study, your institution, and the year that you graduated. And down here, I have my research experiences. And I had it on top because usually I apply to grad school, so that would be what they're looking for. I have my professional affiliation. So someone said APA, American Psychological Association right here. And then other big organizations that I've been a member of. And then I have my publications here. I have my presentations. I have my honors and awards here, teaching experiences, clinical experiences, extracurricular involvement. So for right now, I'm a peer mentor in a student organization. So yeah, so speaking engagement, I included this one right here. Okay. And then I have my other skills and certification. So for example, if you are bilingual, you can include that right here. Okay. Let me see if you guys have. Okay, let me read your question. Yep, yeah, sorry. Yeah, depending on the jobs or the grad school, the program that you're applying to, you can move stuff around and you can get creative with your CV. Yep. Okay, so that would be it. Okay, so yeah, that will be all of my presentation. Do we have any questions?
I think we'll just cover the questions when we go into the breakout rooms, but thank you so much for presenting.
All right, thank you.
And then last but not least, we have Dr. Lawson, which is going to present personal statements.
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Okay. I know it's the end of the semester or getting, we're like on the hump or over the hump and going down because everyone's cameras are off and we're just kind of, doing our own little things here. But thank you for coming today, and really excited to see all the talk in the chat about just the excitement about applying to grad school and trying to figure out your next steps. I realize this is incredibly challenging to do, especially in a field like psychology, where there's so many different opportunities out there. So kudos to SPA for trying to get, some information to you guys, and hopefully you're finding today helpful. So I'm going to try to follow up on Sarah and Quinn's great presentation. And Quinn, I loved your slides. Talking about the personal statement. So I'm going to try to keep this somewhat quick because I know we want to leave room for questions. But very quickly, what do you guys think a personal statement is?
Is it like a mission statement where you're stating like why you want to go to this school, like the purpose of?
It is. So normally a personal statement, you're going to be communicating to the university, the admissions committee as to why you want to go to the program, your qualifications, and why they should take you on. That really is the overarching goal of a personal statement. But some other things that we don't really realize we're doing in this statement is one, a personal statement is a picture that tells us who you are. It's an invitation to get the reader to get to know you on a more personal level, or more, not, I shouldn't say personal, I should say just more in depth because it's still very professional. So normally when you're applying for grad schools, they'll have your transcripts, they will have your CV, and they will have letters of recommendation. The personal statement is your chance to make your CV come to life. So it's an invitation to allow them to get to know you professionally a little bit better. It also indicates your priorities by the information that you choose to highlight and to convey. So it's not only here's everything I've done, but implicitly by what you're communicating to the committee, you're demonstrating your priorities. And it's a story about your career path and preparation is probably what you guys think about it as the most. What's the purpose of the personal statement? Why do we make you guys write these?
Is it to see our potential?
To see your potential? Yep, I think not only potential in communication skills, but also to see your potential fit. Any other ideas? One purpose of the personal statement that may seem obvious and may not, but I remember when I was in your shoes, I got these type of talks about, you know, what is a CV, what is a personal statement after I applied to graduate school. And I remember sitting there and being like, oh, I totally didn't realize that. And this was one of those moments for me. A personal statement is telling us about your path, is telling us about your past, your present, and also your future. Okay, so we're not asking you to just tell us, oh, this is what I've done in college at UTSA. We're asking you to tell us what you've done in your past, where you are at now, which is typically something like, I'm realizing I want to apply to your school for whatever reasons, but then also showing us that you have a long-term objective. That is something that your CV cannot do. Your CV is only going to include things that you have done and you have accomplished. Your personal statement is your chance to help make sense of your CV, but also to tell us what you plan to do in the future. So your CV is really the point where you get to paint your pathway and you get to really make your CV come alive and really tell us about your journey, who you are, where you've been, and where you're going. You may see the personal statement called many different things. So they may be called statements of purpose, personal essays, reflective essays, narrative, written statements. They can be called lots of different things, and they can also have a lot of different constraints. So some personal statements may allow you to write for 3 pages. Some may allow you to write for 3 paragraphs, right? Different universities and different programs are going to have different requirements, and they may be called different things, but typically what we're going to want you to address is, why are you applying to this program? What are your previous relevant experiences? long-term career goals and how does this program fit into it. And then more specifically for PhD programs or programs where you will be paired with a specific mentor, we will also want you to tell us specifically who you're interested in working with and why. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys some really broad tips on writing personal statements, but I thought maybe I would pause for a quick second to see if you guys have any questions. Okay, I am doing that good of a job. Love it. I am open, of course, to any questions, and I know we'll have questions later, but some broad tips. So writing a personal statement is honestly probably the hardest thing you're going to do in applying to graduate school programs. One of the reasons why it's so hard is because this might be the first time that you really have to explicitly articulate what you've done and where you're going and why you want to apply to specific programs. So when I work with students on writing personal statements, my first piece of advice to them is you should not writing should not be the first thing you do. You should spend a decent amount of time just reflecting on your own path, reflecting on where you want to go and who you are before you even start to write. Get a very clear understanding of yourself. And that can honestly sometimes be very challenging. My second tip is to be very specific and concrete in your writing. Third is to connect everything back to the purpose of why you're applying to that program or your career goals. And the fourth is to allow time for multiple rounds of feedback and revision. And I'm going to talk just a little bit more about each of these. So self-reflection before writing. I always encourage my students to have a really honest conversation with themselves about their career goals. You know, if you're someone who is motivated to go on to grad school for reasons that are more external motivation, like, oh, I want to get more money, or, oh, everyone is telling me this is what I should do, it's likely going to come across in your statement, right? You need to sit down and think with yourself, have honest conversations. Why do I intrinsically want this for myself? Why do I think I will be good at this? How can I sell them on who I am and my skills? And how can I convince them that I'm going to achieve what I say I want to set out to achieve? Having a very clear narrative and very clear sense of self before you go to write this document is really going to help you. Really think about your journey and also deciding what experiences can best highlight your preparation, the characteristics that you want the committee to know about, and your potential for success. Outline those experiences, but I also encourage you to really put some thought into what you want the readers to take away from knowing that piece of information about you. So this isn't just going to be a document where you regurgitate your CV. And this isn't just going to be a document where you tell them every single thing you've ever done. It needs to be very intentional. And I like Sarah used that word a lot when she was talking about resumes. It needs to be very intentional in choosing what you're highlighting and choosing how you're making sense of your narrative and your experiences and choosing what you want those people to understand about you based off of your accomplishments. So I view a lot of the heavy lifting in a personal statement is this part, reflecting and making sure you know who you are and what you're all about. Another complication of this, which I'm sure many of you guys are probably feeling, is, you know, in a maybe ideal world, we perceive that we want students that are like, oh, I was always a psych major. I always knew I wanted to do clinical psychology. So I did my undergrad in psych and I got a 4.0 and here I am. Like this very straight linear line. We know that's not the reality for many students, right? We have a lot of backtracking. We may also have a lot of, I always know I kind of wanted to do this, but it took me a while to land on it. That's very common, and I'm here to tell you that is okay, and probably actually makes you an even more interesting and compelling candidate in some cases. But you need to make the narrative very clear. It is your job to make it very clear to us to see the pathway. That is your job to make it clear to us as readers. Number two, be specific and concrete in your writing. You need to put yourself in their shoes. The reviewers often are going to have very little knowledge of your prior experiences. They may even have very little knowledge about UTSA in general, right? If you're applying all over this country, they may not know UTSA. Don't make any assumptions about prior knowledge of the people who are reading this document. A great example that I like to provide from a student, oh, I was ahead of myself. When you're not specific and you're not concrete in your writing, you leave things up to the reviewer's imagination to interpret your experiences. And I can tell you, as someone who reads a lot of personal statements, when a student does not concretely tell me what they have done, I always assume they did less, because these are high stakes situations. I'm not going to assume that you have skills that you may not have, right? So you do not want to leave this up to the imagination of the reviewers. You want to be very clear and very concrete. An example here, a lot of students will say something like, during my time at UTSA, I worked on multiple studies in the growth lab with Dr. Lawson. That's my research lab. This is a fine sentence, but it doesn't tell me anything about my lab and the lab and what we do. Doesn't say how many semesters, doesn't say how many studies, doesn't say what you did specifically, no idea of the skills that you gained. So as an evaluator, I'm reading that sentence, and I don't want to say it's a useless sentence, but it doesn't provide a lot of concrete information. Versus, this is a student I worked with before. Dr. Lawson I assisted Dr. Lawson in many aspects of this project, including recruitment of mother-child dyads, proofreading, editing, studying materials, creating props for the study, training research assistants, conducting testing sessions of 4 and 7-year-olds, coding transcripts. I worked with Dr. Lawson and her team of 10 other research assistants to collect data from 142 dyads during the past summer. Nearly all cases I interacted with the child participants as a tester or observer. Okay, concrete, literally leaving nothing to the imagination, putting it all out there. Do you guys see the difference? Okay, so be specific and concrete. Connect everything back to the program and your career goal, everything. When do you guys think we review these statements?
They review them before your interview?
We do review them before you're even invited for an interview. I think when I asked this question before, someone was like, oh, you probably review them like when you're eating lunch and on your lunch break and like relaxing. And I'm like, that would be nice if that's how academia worked. Academics and people who work in academia tend to be just like incredibly busy. You guys know that. You work with us on a daily basis, and your students who are equally as busy, right? I don't want to say that we do not give time to these statements, because we do, and we take student applications very seriously. It's one of the most important parts of our job. But that doesn't mean that sometimes we may be reading these statements at 9 o'clock at night after we've been working all day and we just put the kids to bed, or we may be reading them in between doctor's appointments, right? Like everyone just lives busy lives. The reason I say connect everything back to the program and career goal is because sometimes we make assumptions that it's obvious. The connections are obvious implicitly. But for someone who is tired, who has had a crazy day, who has a lot of other things on their plate, like academics typically do, it may not be obvious at that point, right? So we need to make everything very clear. You need to take the thinking out of it. Do not make me think. And that was actually advice that I got when I was on the job market for a faculty position. Do not make your committee members think. Be very clear, spell it out. It makes you look more confident and more consistent in what you want and your goals. And it also, again, doesn't leave things up to chance. Last thing, allow time for multiple rounds of feedback and revisions. If you work closely with professors in a research lab or you have a relationship with a professor, certainly ask them for feedback. Other people that you may know, even people who don't know the field, can often provide good feedback on editing a flow and if it makes sense. I will say with most students that I worked with in the past, we typically have at least 4 rounds of revision. The first draft they give is never, ever what they even come close to submitting. And typically, I will say it's not due to poor writing, even though that often needs to improve a little bit. But the reason why students typically have to go through so many rounds is because their ideas are underdeveloped. So that's linking back to the first part, right? That you really have to have this idea and clear understanding of who you are. So reflection, that is huge. And self-reflection, do it with yourself, but also sit down with a friend, a colleague, sit down with a professor and just narrate and say, this is how I'm thinking of explaining all of this, right? Really put time into how you're going to approach the document, be specific, connect everything back to the program and career goals, allow time for feedback and revisions. Similar to Quinn, some things to avoid, grammatical and spelling errors. This is a writing sample. Everyone looks at this as your potential for writing, which is 90% of what you do in grad school. Do not treat this as an extended CV. You do not have to highlight everything that is on your CV in here, and do not simply just tell me what is on your CV. This should enhance your CV, not replicate it. Avoid cliches, like, I don't know. I've read one before that was like, the $1 million question isn't if I'm good enough for you, it's if your program is good enough for me. Like that kind of is like, downer on the program, and also just like a really cliche. Avoid the I problem in your writing, consistently starting your sentences with saying, I did this, I was that, I want to be. Try to find different ways to use your language. Do not go outside of word and page limit. And especially in psychology, we have to be careful with oversharing personal experiences. Many of you may want to go into mental health careers, maybe based off of personal experiences or experiences of family members and friends. There's a tactful way that you can introduce that into your statement. I encourage you to be very careful in how you do it, because even though you may be reviewed by clinical psychologists or individuals and scholars in the mental health field, they are still people. So they're not going to really love it if you're like, I want to be a clinical psychologist because I'm bipolar, right? Not to feed into stigmas or anything, but there's a way that you can present that and be genuine and still protect your personal experiences a little bit, or present them in a more professional way. Last thing, students typically ask, what is the way that this has to be formatted? There's no really standard format. Some universities will make you adhere to a format that they want you to do. But if you are someone who needs a layout, typically the first paragraph is an introduction. You're a student at UTSA, your big picture career goal, big picture interest in the program. Spend the middle of the paper highlighting experiences. Here, be concrete, show them your experiences versus don't show them, don't tell, which I didn't really get into here, but that goes back to being concrete. Be very concrete. And last paragraph, make sure you tell them why their program specifically, and why faculty members specifically. Whew. Okay, I wanted to make that quick. I don't know if I accomplished that, but I am done.
Thank you. Your presentation about personal statements has always been my favorite. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to do a little change of plans though, just because we did go over time. I know a lot of us have commitments at 6. So I'm just, instead of doing breakout rooms, I don't think we really have time to be super interactive with it. I'm just going to open up the last 9 minutes or so to an open Q&A For whatever members that have questions, go ahead and send them in the chat or turn on your mic.
Tavia has a question in the chat. I guess I'll read it. So, what would be an example of presenting your personal stories in a more professional way?
So if Sarah and Quinn, I would be interested to hear your perspectives too. But I would say if you're someone who is interested in the mental health field because of your personal journey with mental health, I really would encourage you to reach out to someone who you have a relationship in that field and work this out on your own and ask them, you know, hey, these are my experiences. This is the genuine reason why I'm interested in this field. How can I best present this to other people? I don't know that I can really provide a blanket statement here because everyone's experiences are so different. But you know, someone said in the chat, like, I'm interested in helping others due to my own mental health journey. Like that may be okay. But it's hard. It's very hard because you want to be genuine to yourself. But again, the people reviewing are still human beings. And we know there's huge stigma. So you normally don't want to like come in with like balls on fire, right? And just point it all out there at first. But I think the best way is to reach out to a confidant you have within the field and talk to them and say, how can we form this into a coherent narrative? Sarah and Quinn, do you guys have any recommendations or ideas?
Yeah, I'd agree with everything you're saying too. I think because we also will look at statements in the Career Center too. And I think what I see a lot, especially with the mental health arena, is a lot of extra details. Like it becomes like a layout for a story where it's like details about family members and things like that. And then it becomes like that's a whole page or 2 pages about the story. And so I encourage students, I said, you know what, you're gonna lose your reader. Not saying your story isn't important, it's very impactful, but the intention here is really to target how this inspired your career interest. So does 2 pages really go overboard in saying this solidified your interest in this type of career? Yeah, so you want to keep at the facts, like maybe what inspired you? Because a lot of times I talk with students and they'll say the therapist that they had really inspired them, or maybe the therapist they had wasn't someone they didn't care for. So then they were inspired that way. Again, don't go negative in this letter, but it's the fact that the experiences you had in the field of therapy inspired you to show the impact that you can make on other people's lives. So it's like the fact that what that career does and how that inspired you, not so much the family story details or personal details, if that makes sense. It's probably a really long answer, but I hope it made sense.
I think I'll just echo Sarah to say, I think that's a great approach because it's still genuine to your story. And just like Sarah said, you know, your stories do matter, but this is not at a point when people are judging you and making like laser thin decisions. What you really want to display here is your potential for the career and potential to be a good student. So focusing it on how your own experiences made you appreciate something about the job may demonstrate that you have insight towards the job, right? And put it in like a more positive angle.
Yeah, and just one more thing on that I see a lot, because I know a lot of you have a helping profession interest, of course. Needing to go beyond just saying, I want to help others. You have to really understand the profession. I'm sure if I get a lot of documents, I can't imagine, Dr. Lawson, how many you get in regards, but you have to go, again, understanding the profession, that it goes deeper than helping others. So you really need to do some research to really do a deep dive and see if this is really a good fit for you. You know, watch informational interviews of other professions in the field. interview other faculty that are also, you know, maybe some adjuncts if you want to be a clinician, or if you want to go into research, take advantage of the great talent that's at UTSA too. Be very curious and learn a lot about the profession so you can go and do a deeper dive on your career goals and outcomes, so then the reader really understands that. So that's just one thing I definitely would suggest.
Maybe I'll just chime in and say, Sarah, that is so true. And when students come to me and they're like, I just want to help people, what I normally say is, you can work in the BK Lounge and Burger King and help people, right? There's a million jobs out here where you can meaningfully help people. What makes this job special? And in fact, if students write their if I'm reading a personal statement and it's like, I want to go to psychology to help people, but doesn't go into any more depth, that's like the kiss of death. That's an indication to me that you haven't really thought this through and done the research like Sarah is suggesting.
Sorry, I know a lot of questions are coming through the,
Yeah.
I think I saw one about what
I can address some of the questions if that's okay. Okay.
Yeah, there were
CV. So
Okay. I was just gonna go through it one by one. But yeah, so the first one, Sahari asked if how can one do more self-reflection when they're busy? Are you asking for self-reflection in terms of like writing your purpose or your statement of purpose? Okay. So in my experiences, I approached it as a kind of like a final paper for a class. So, you know, it's a big deal. It has it contains a lot of your grade percentage. So I would include some portion of my time every day to write just a little bit. And so like 1 hour every day, just to write up a little bit in some section, and then build it up. Does that answer your question?
Quinn, maybe I think I'll just piggyback so I will say, and I said in the chat before, my experiences personally are probably a little skewed from what some of you want to do, because I went straight to a PhD program out of undergrad, which I do see there are some people here that want to do that. PhD applications are typically heavier lifts, so like a master's school application, just because PhDs are more, they tend to be more competitive, so they tend to want more out of you. But when I was applying again for PhD programs, I was given the recommendation to plan for it like it's a 3-credit class. And I think that was actually really spot on in terms of the time commitment, because as Sarah mentioned, it's not only creating all these documents, but it's then having interviews. And those interviews may include pre-screening phone interviews, and then they may include going to the campus for 2 or 3 days. So this really is a pretty serious commitment, not only into your like future career goals, but it's a time investment. So if you're at the point where you're like, man, I don't know if I have the time for this, especially if you're at the point that you're like, I don't even have time for self-reflection, I would maybe encourage you to consider a gap year where you can take some time off and really think about what you want to do and the self-reflection components, because the self-reflecting I think is necessary for the document, but it's also a really good exercise to just have with yourself and to make sure that this really is the path that you want to go on, right? And you want to know that before you go on to grad school. The time and financial investment and other resources, you want to be pretty sure, right, that it's the path that you want to go on. I think I know it's 6 o'clock, but I see a couple of other questions of students asking like what would stand out the most or be most impressive on a resume. Are you thinking of like a CV for grad school or a resume for a job? CV. Sarah and Quinn, do you guys have any suggestions?
In regards to what would be like most impressive, I think definitely just I think the same would be true for a CV, but well-roundedness. Like there's not just really one set thing that an employer would look for. It's like comprehensive. So it's not just a GPA, that might be a piece that they look at, but then other engagement throughout your college experience through student orgs and leadership in student orgs and volunteerism and jobs. Even a job that doesn't match your career goals can also shows that time management, because I understand some of us have to have jobs for financial reasons that might not be in our career goals, but those skill sets that relate to your actual career goals you have developed, like leadership and teamwork and critical thinking that you've done in your jobs too. So again, that alignment, I think, is the best advice I would give. Intentional alignment would probably be the theme of tonight for sure.
Okay, I'm really, really sorry to end things. I know there's a lot of questions left, but unfortunately, a lot of our hosts of this meeting have commitments at 6 and they have to go. So we're gonna send.
Alexis, maybe I'll just say, if you want to transfer the host over to me, I'm happy to stay back a little bit to answer some questions.
Okay, that would be awesome, actually. Mariana, if you want to transfer the host to Dr.
And Sarah and Quinn, if you guys can't stay, that's fine too. I don't want to like extend your commitments.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to stay. I was actually trying to like type really fast in the chat to answer some of the questions.
Yeah, I can hang out a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, you guys are great.
Can I just, so the sign out is going to stay open like another 5 minutes. So if y'all haven't signed out, please make sure you do so.
Okay. So Celia asked that if you don't have a lot of experience, how would you recommend building that up? So I think the first step would be to identify your goals, what you are looking for, what you are aiming for. So let's say you are applying for grad school, what kind of program it is, what are they looking for? Let's say they're looking for clinical experiences. I would try to look into that. Like, let's say I can intern or I can work in an office of a psychologist. That way I can kind of observe how they work. And that would go onto my CV. That can go onto my CV as well. Anything that is relevant to what you're looking for and your goal, I would recommend looking for them now.
Yeah, and Celia, I think you might be surprised at the amount of experience you have. I can't tell you how many times I talk with students and they're like, I don't have any. And then they're like, oh yeah, I interned over here. And I'm like, hello. Mm-hmm. So, and again, that's just one example, but experiences can come from work that you've done in this organization. It can come from projects. It can come from a job, even if it's not career related. And then if you're in the planning stages of how can one build experience, even if you're looking at a job or an internship that wants a certain level of experience, volunteerism is a great way to get started in that. Like if a job wants you to have experience working with a certain population, like working with children, and you're really passionate about that, but you haven't had yet an opportunity to work with children, like volunteering at the Children's Bereavement Center, or there's opportunities within our community to work with children, volunteer with them, and youth development positions and things like that too. So that's a great way. Just using that as an example, volunteerism is a great way to build experience as a starting point.
Thank you so much for answering my question. I really appreciate it.
Are there other questions? Yeah.
Oh, I'm just going to say there's a lot of questions in the chat, but I think we kind of hit on many of them, and some may be buried in here a little bit. So if we haven't answered your question, please, even if you put it earlier, go ahead and put it in the chat, or feel free just to, turn off your mic and chat with us.
I have one more question, actually. So real quick, for like a resume, like I don't want this to sound like a dumb question, but like when should you start it? Like, should you include everything from like high school for that? Or should you start it like when you're like still at your undergrad? Or when should you start including those experiences?
That's a great question. Actually, you want to keep it college focused. So pretty much the cutoff that we advise students, like if a student is an incoming freshman and they have less than 30 semester credits, it would make sense then for high school content to be on there. But if they have more than 30 semester credits, then high school content starts to leave. I would say the exception to that is, like, for example, I used to work with nursing students and they would interview at a children's hospital, but back in high school, they volunteered at that children's hospital that they were interviewing for. That might make sense. But it's not doing like a deep dive of things you did in high school. So that would be my recommendation, is keeping it college focused.
Thank you.
And in regards to starting, meaning like actually creating the document, say a good time is now, because it can be like, I wouldn't wait until you're starting to tailor to a job description, because let's be honest, the job searching process, even grad school searching, is a learning curve in itself. So if you're already documenting those experiences, it's just a matter of editing those down the road. So it makes your life a little easier. So I would just say start before it's even required.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had put in the chat earlier, and I know that Quinn had responded to me, but I was wondering if you guys also had anything to add to it. I had pretty much asked how we can make part-time positions outside of our field more relevant to our, our resumes or our CVs, just because I know that I personally haven't been in the field that I'm interested in a while because of COVID. So I've had to do more part-time. I just wanted to know how I could, because of COVID, make that still look relevant and like I'm still engaged in the field that I'm interested in.
I mean, I can start, but I feel like I've been taking over the conversation. So
I
if
also feel like you're the expert, Sarah.
You're carrying the team.
Okay, well, I'll do a deep dive here. I'm going to use the nursing example again, because it really rings true to this. So pretty much the moral of the story is like speaking the language of your field. So that attests to knowing, being familiar with your field of interest too, because for example, used to work with nursing students, and of course you can't be a nurse before you have the right credentials. Same thing with a lot of those who have interests in wanting to do research or a therapist. You have to have the right credentials. So you got to start somewhere. So give yourself credit for that first. Again, we all start somewhere, but the alignment is the skill set. So I used to, with nursing students, they said, oh, I worked at Whataburger. I was a team leader. I had to clean bathrooms. I had to do some training and do this. I was like, great. You maintained a clean and safe, hygienic environment. Again, that's very nursing focused. Instead of having the employer read that they cleaned bathrooms, speak the language of your field. Same thing with leadership. Maybe you didn't have a role as a manager, but you were tasked with having to do all the training and you hated it at the time, but now's the payoff. So you can talk about how you were responsible for training all new employees, or even if you knew it was like 10 or a big amount, quantify that. If the positions you're looking for are talking about like communication and problem solving, if it's like a retail or a restaurant role, I know for a fact, based on personal experience, that you've probably had experience in handling difficult communication situations. So you can say effectively handled or demonstrate effective communication through handling customer concerns or something to that effect. There's no one way to say it, but just so you can see the pattern that the skill sets at the top, and then the latter part is kind of the context, but it's like categorical context towards your field of interest, if that makes sense.
I think that was great, Sarah. I think the only thing that I'll add is understanding your skill set can be really hard for you to do by your own independently. So I would really encourage you guys to take up the resources like Sarah and her team and professors and others that you have relationships with to just say like, hey, I have been working at Lauderberger for the past 5 years, but now I want to go to clinical psychology. How do I make this work? And you know, sometimes we don't know our own strengths. That's like a huge like human weakness. We just don't know our own strengths. So having these conversations with other people can help you to identify like, oh yeah, I actually do have that skill. Oh yeah, that is something unique that not everyone has, right? And I think that's part of this like time for self-reflection that is, I view, really necessary. Because it's going to help you, but include other people in those conversations. Don't just like struggle on your own. Doing that. I know for me, that would have been a really big struggle to try to figure it out on my own.
Yeah, and I think too, like taking advantage of assessments, like the Career Center has a career assessment available, and like how you would do that is if we have an appointment type called assessment or career exploration, and then when you were requesting it, you put would like to take an assessment, then those instructions can be provided to you, because then once you take it, your career consultant can interpret those results and make sense out of that. So that's a good place to start. That's currently the only one we offer, but I do know some folks who like to take personality assessments like MBTI and things of that effect too, just to help kind of see something tangible that helps you kind of see some patterns, and whether you agree with them or not, it's just a good baseline to start from, something to add context to that self-exploration piece.
That was really helpful. Thank you so much. That really helped me grasp what I need to go moving forward from here. Could you repeat the quiz that you just said?
Yes, I was trying to put the instructions in the chat, but it wouldn't let me. So I think the best bet to do that is if you make a career appointment in the Career Center and you select assessment or career exploration, and then in the help requested, you put would like to take an assessment. That way you can get the instructions to take the assessment prior to your appointment, and then you and the career consultant can go over those results to kind of discuss that. Because I know maybe some of you had to take it for an AIS class, but what happens is people don't schedule the appointment to get it interpreted, so it's left missing understanding the concepts about it. So it's just like, oh, I just took this thing that was required, and it says I want to be environmentalist, but I don't agree with that, and that was dumb or whatever. And it actually can provide us context because there's a trait report, but then we can kind of see patterns. Instead of just looking at one career, we can look at patterns and say, hey, these are some patterns we're seeing. What are your thoughts on that? So it allows us some context to reflect on that. So I would just say, go ahead and do an appointment, and then you can get the instructions that way too.
Yes, thank you. That's a resource I'm definitely going to take advantage of. Thank you so much.
Sarah, I'm going to share my screen real quick. So I just Googled like the UTSA Career Center, and then is this the right page, and then click on make an appointment?
Yes. So Handshake is that platform that they will use to schedule an appointment. It's also to look for jobs or internships. It's also to look at events with employers. So it's like that one-stop shop for that. So that's what Handshake is for those of you who might not be familiar.
So this is where they can also make an appointment for the assessments within Handshake.
Yeah, so an appointment type will be an assessment. And let me see, will it let me, I'm gonna try to add because I have the instructions, but whenever I go to my computer, it won't go to my files where it's at. Let's see. What's the best way I can do that?
Oh, I see.
Let me look 1 second. Maybe. Sorry, it's the perfect time for my computer to not be cooperating. So yes, for time's sake, I would say just schedule an assessment appointment and then you'll get those instructions as the logistics of setting up your appointment. Sorry, I apologize.
So I found the career assessment tab on the career page and I put it in the chat. Is that the correct one?
Let's see, because it was saying can't load on my end for the page. So let me check this out. It keeps telling me that page can't be reached. Let's see.
I just put it up, Sarah, whatever Quinn shared.
Yeah, that I don't think it's the updated because the fun thing about software with the assessment is that they've updated their instructions on it because we pay for the software. So like I have a newer set of instructions.
Okay.
So that needs to be added. I'm gonna make a note of that.
And maybe that's something that maybe you could share with Debbie, the president, and she can disperse it to everyone. Because I think, our students we have so many students and it's hard to communicate all this information effectively to everyone. So maybe sending out to the students Insight Club would be a great way to reach out.
Yes, yeah, I'll send it to Debbie for sure.
Perfect.
Yes, that's a good solution to getting assessment instructions. Ask Debbie because I'm going to send it to her when we get off the call.
I did see there's one more question. Are recommendation letters supposed to reinforce the information or add new? Maybe I can answer that as someone who writes a lot of recommendation letters. I would say in an ideal world, you want to get letter writers that know you very well and can speak to you, speak about you and your characteristics in a variety of capacities. So for example, if you know a professor because you were a student in their class, and maybe you took more than one class, maybe you also volunteered for their research lab, or you engaged with them through Student Site Club or other types of engagements. I think those are the type of relationships you should be looking to build in an ideal world. And then in that case, those letters are often going to have some replication over what you're saying, but it's often going to add more information about what it's like to work with you, about your characteristics, your strengths, personality dispositions are typically mentioned as well. So hopefully we can say something like you're a pleasure to work with and easy to communicate and work with as well. So often if you take the time building those relationships, your letter is going to reflect what you have said, but then more, right? And from the perspective of someone who is working with you and someone who has a perspective too of the skills and what is needed to succeed in the desired field that you're going into. So I think that's an important part too. Now, I will say the pandemic has thrown a huge wrench into recommendation letters, because some of the experiences with professors, as you guys know, have just been limited. So now when I write letters, a lot of times it's students who are like, hey, I took your online asynchronous class. I came to meet with you once or twice. Can you write me a letter? And I normally do because I want to help the students out because I realize building those relationships has been really hard in the pandemic. But I also typically make those students come and meet with me at least one more, if not two more times, so that I can get to have a better understanding of their career goals and, kind of what they've done and where they're going. But I would say those are kind of the situations where I'm more or less reinforcing the information you're already providing. So in terms of what are letters doing, they can range, right? They can range from this student came to my class, they got a B, they did a good job, to, you know, all this really rich personality characteristics that are important for the jobs, all of these other experiences that you have. So there's a range. Ideally, you want to try to get the ones at this end, right? Where they can speak more about you personally and how you would be a good fit for the type of program or job that you're trying to go for. But those are also the hardest ones to get. I'm not trying to scare you guys, I promise. Sarah, Quinn, do you guys have anything to add to that?
No, not necessarily. I was making sure I emailed Debbie the career assessment instructions. So Debbie, you should receive that in an email. But no, I don't have anything to add to that.
Yeah, me neither. I think my answer was more kind of like to the point of the question, whether it should add new or just reinforce what you said in your other documents. I think my answer was just kind of like both. It would be a bonus if they could provide new information that's impressive about you, and so that to impress your employer or your committee.
Yeah. So you're only going to get that new information though if you have a relationship with that person, right? I think that's what I was trying to say is like the ideal letter is going to reiterate a little bit, but add new information. But if we don't have that information, we can't add it, right? If we don't have those experiences with you. So for those of you that are approaching the job market or approaching graduate school applications anytime soon, I know the past 2 years really have been really crazy, and we've been flipped upside down here in academia and you know, daily life in general. But I still really encourage you to reach out to your professors, you know, go to their office hours, even if you have to make up a question to go, right? Try to build these relationships, because even though it's in the pandemic, we have an ethical obligation. I cannot lie in my letter of recommendation for you. I cannot say like, oh, I have a strong feeling the student would be great, even though I don't personally know them. You know, I can't say that. And I will tell you, and I think my colleagues approach this very similarly, for students that for me, I teach classes that have like 150 students. So they're big classes. But you need to think about, what do your professors know about you? And if all they know is that you came to class and you got an A, for example, that is literally all they can ethically say in the letter of recommendation. They may be able to provide context on like, oh, my class is challenging. I require writing assignments. My exams are hard and they did a good job. So that indicates to me that they studied and put in effort. But really beyond that, they cannot say more. So really putting yourself in the shoes of the professors, what did they know about you? And if you're feeling like they don't know enough, start to build those relationships. It's really never too late to try to build those relationships. And I get it that it's been weird for the past 2 years, but I think you owe it to yourself to engage in one more awkward Zoom meeting to try to build that relationship and get a better letter of recommendation out of it.
Yeah, and to add to that, sometimes when you ask the professor to write a recommendation letter and they say no, they're doing you a favor, because they generally feel that they cannot, or they don't know you enough to write you a strong recommendation letter. So yeah.
That is a good point. And I would say though, like if you're a student that is struggling, like I've worked with a lot of students where I am straight up with them. Like I will say, okay, I can write you a letter, but I want you to be aware, this is basically what I'm going to say, because this has been my experiences with you. Do you still want me to write that letter? And often students are sometimes desperate to be like, yes, because I have no one else to ask. If you find yourself in that position, take the time now. Seriously, take the time tomorrow to shoot a professor an email and try to build those relationships. Because basically me saying to you, or as Quinn is saying, people might just say no. And if someone like me is like, are you sure you want me to write one? You should take that as an indication of it may fulfill a requirement in number of letters, but it may not help move your application forward in a positive way. Is this something you guys are stressed about, the letters?
I personally am, as like a senior. I was very involved in the beginning, but I'm afraid that, you know, some of my professors might be like, oh, I remember you by your name. But maybe now that the years have passed, it's been a little difficult to remember me and what I've done. So that's something that I'm concerned about.
So I would say like that is in your control to some degree. When students email me and ask for letters, I normally have like a standard set of documents that I require. So I require their CV, I require their personal statement, I require logistics, like how many universities you're applying to, when are the due dates, and when can when do I have to like get my letter submitted and how. But then if it's a student, like, you know, if this was our relationship and I had you in class 2 years ago or something, and I may not remember you, I literally will ask you to detail everything you've done with me. And I don't think I'm unique in that way. I think we realize that, number one, they probably will remember your name and your face and remember you to some degree. But most people, I think, if they're good letter writers and you know, and they want to do you a solid, they will ask you like, refresh my memory. Let's think about everything you've done so I can talk about it. And you can even take that opportunity on your first reach out to them, right? So you can be like, hi, Dr. Smith, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I was in, you know, I worked with you in this capacity blank years ago. I'm hoping we can touch base. I'm getting ready for graduate school and I want to, you know, get some of your advice, right? So remind them from the beginning that you have a pre-established relationship, and then try to rekindle the relationship a little bit.
That's great. That's a great tip that I'm definitely going to start drafting some emails today. Another thing is, if we were taking a gap year, how could we go about maybe asking a professor to write a recommendation letter? I know you said start now. So is that something that you recommend, maybe emailing now, getting in touch now and saying, you know, I might be taking a gap year? Is that maybe an appropriate
I think that's appropriate. I think it's appropriate to, you know, just put your name back out there, you know, and maybe just ask, like, I'm a senior starting to wrap up my program here at UTSA, and I'm curious if you have any career advice for me. I'm thinking about taking a gap year, but would really like to hear your insights and would like to talk with you. Can I come to your office hours, or can we set up an appointment? You know, so I think if you have people lined up for letter writer positions, not let them go. You know, try to line that up and sustain it, even if you're going to take a year off. I've had students come back to me 3-4 years after they leave, right? And they're like, oh, it's time for that letter of recommendation. And typically we have to go through this process of catch me up. Let's make sure we have all the details and tell me what you've been doing. But just taking time off wouldn't necessarily mean that people are not going to represent you and help to support you later on.
Thank you. That was a relief to hear.
So one thing I would like to say is that before the pandemic, SPA would do workshops every semester, apart from events and general meetings and socials. So that's something that Alexis wants to bring back next semester. So that's also a great way to start building like those closer connections with people that can assist you in writing CVs, personal statements and letters, recommendations and resumes. So maybe we would invite all 3 of y'all to come and do workshops with our students. So
Yeah, that would be great. I know this is really obviously very important information that we don't provide to you in the classroom, right? So we have to provide other outlets, and you guys are doing the right thing by actively trying to seek the information too. I realize we are now 30 minutes after, and Sarah and Quinn have been so generous with their time. And it doesn't look like there's any other questions in the chat. So maybe I'll just throw my email in the chat. That if any of you guys have questions, you're more than welcome to shoot me an email. And I would be happy to continue this discussion with you individually further. And you know, Sarah's at the Career Center, and I don't want to.
Yeah, no, I have my email on the slides and also in the chat, so feel free to reach out.
I'm like, I don't want to volunteer Quinn, but how do I wrap this up?
Please, yeah, always feel free to volunteer me.